Hello and welcome to today's podcast, where we'll be discussing the prefrontal cortex, serotonin, and dopamine. These are all important aspects of neuroscience that can help us better understand how our brains work and how we can increase our feelings of happiness and well-being. Let's start with neuroscience is the study of the nervous system, including the brain, spinal cord, and other nerves throughout the body. Scientists have been studying the brain for centuries, but it's only in recent decades that we've made significant advances in understanding how it works. One area of study that's of particular interest to researchers is the neuroscience of happiness. Scientists have discovered that certain neurotransmitters, or chemicals in the brain, are closely linked to feelings of pleasure and happiness. Two of the most well-known neurotransmitters in this regard are dopamine and serotonin. One area often referred to as the reward neurotransmitter because it's released when we experience something pleasurable, such as eating delicious food or receiving a compliment. Serotonin, on the other hand, is known for its role in regulating mood and is often associated with feelings of well-being and contentment. To neurotransmitters, researchers have also identified specific brain regions that are associated with happiness. The prefrontal cortex, for example, plays a key role in decision-making and emotional regulation, while the amygdala is involved in processing emotions such as fear and pleasure. Understanding the neuroscience of happiness can help us better understand how our brains function and how we can take steps to increase our own happiness. By engaging in activities that increase dopamine and serotonin levels, such as exercise, spending time with loved ones, or pursuing hobbies we enjoy, we can increase our feelings of happiness and well-being. And by strengthening the prefrontal cortex through practices such as mindfulness meditation, we can better regulate our emotions and make decisions that lead to greater happiness in the long run. Overall, the neuroscience of happiness is a fascinating field of study with important implications for our lives. By exploring this topic further, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves and how we can achieve greater well-being. Overall, dopamine is a neurotransmitter, or chemical messenger, in the brain that is closely associated with pleasure and reward. When dopamine is released in the brain, it produces a feeling of pleasure or euphoria. This release can occur in response to a variety of stimuli, such as food, sex, or even drugs of abuse. Dopamine is produced in several areas of the brain, including the substantia nigra and the ventral tegmental area. These areas are involved in the reward pathway, which is a complex network of neurons that communicate with each other in other parts of the brain to produce feelings of pleasure and motivation. To experience something pleasurable, such as eating a delicious meal or receiving a compliment, dopamine is released in the reward pathway. This release reinforces the behavior that led to the pleasure and motivates us to repeat the behavior in the future. In addition to its role in pleasure and reward, dopamine is also involved in other important functions in the brain, such as movement and mood regulation. Low levels of dopamine have been associated with conditions such as Parkinson's disease and depression. Overall, dopamine is an important neurotransmitter in the brain that plays a key role in pleasure, reward, and motivation. By understanding its function and how it affects our behavior, we can take steps to increase our own feelings of happiness and well-being. Now let's talk about serotonin is a neurotransmitter, or chemical messenger, in the brain that plays a crucial role in regulating mood. It is involved in a variety of functions, including sleep, appetite, and digestion, but it is most well known for its role in mood regulation. Serotonin is produced in several areas of the brain, including the raphe nuclei, and it works by transmitting signals between neurons. When serotonin levels are low, it can lead to symptoms such as depression and anxiety. Serotonin is often referred to as the feel-good neurotransmitter because it has been shown to produce feelings of well-being and contentment. It is also involved in regulating our emotional responses to various stimuli. There are several ways to increase serotonin levels in the brain, including exercise, exposure to bright light, and certain medications such as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs. By increasing serotonin levels, we can improve our mood and reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. It's important to note that serotonin is just one of many neurotransmitters that play a role in mood regulation, and that the exact mechanisms by which it affects mood are not fully understood. However, research has shown that increasing serotonin levels can have a positive impact on mood and overall well-being. It's important. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that plays a critical role in regulating mood. By understanding how it works and what affects its levels, we can take steps to improve our own mood and overall well-being. Now moving next to the prefrontal cortex is a region of the brain located in the frontal lobes that is involved in a variety of higher cognitive functions, including decision-making, emotional regulation, and social behavior. The key functions of the prefrontal cortex is decision-making. This region of the brain helps us evaluate different options, weigh the pros and cons, and make a choice based on the information available to us. The prefrontal cortex also helps us plan and set goals for the future. In addition to decision-making, the prefrontal cortex is also involved in emotional regulation. This region of the brain helps us control our emotional responses to different stimuli and helps us regulate our emotions in situations that might be stressful or challenging. For example, the prefrontal cortex can help us stay calm and collected in high-pressure situations or help us regulate our emotions when we receive bad news. In addition, the cortex is also involved in social behavior. This region of the brain helps us interpret social cues and understand the emotions and intentions of others. It also helps us regulate our own behavior in social situations and make decisions that are appropriate for the context. Damage to the prefrontal cortex can result in a variety of cognitive and behavioral deficits, including difficulty with decision-making, emotional regulation, and social behavior. For example, individuals with damage to the prefrontal cortex may struggle to make decisions or regulate their emotions, or they may exhibit inappropriate behavior in social situations. The prefrontal cortex is a critical region of the brain that plays a key role in decision-making, emotional regulation, and social behavior. By understanding how this region of the brain works, we can better understand ourselves and others and develop strategies for improving our cognitive and emotional functioning. Happiness is a complex emotion that is associated with activity in multiple regions of the brain. While there is no single happiness center in the brain, researchers have identified several brain regions that are thought to play a role in generating feelings of happiness. Happiness is the amygdala, which is located deep within the temporal lobes of the brain. The amygdala is involved in processing emotions and is known to be particularly important for generating feelings of pleasure and reward. When we experience something pleasurable, such as eating a delicious meal or listening to our favorite music, the amygdala is activated, releasing neurotransmitters like dopamine and creating feelings of happiness and pleasure. Another brain region associated with happiness is the prefrontal cortex, which we discussed earlier. The prefrontal cortex is involved in decision-making and emotional regulation, and research has shown that individuals with greater activity in the prefrontal cortex tend to report higher levels of happiness and life satisfaction. Other brain regions associated with happiness include the nucleus accumbens, which is involved in processing rewards and reinforcing behaviors that lead to pleasure, and the striatum, which is involved in motor and cognitive functions and has been linked to feelings of reward and pleasure. To note that happiness is a complex emotion that involves activity in multiple regions of the brain, and that the exact mechanisms by which these regions generate feelings of happiness are not fully understood. However, by studying brain activity and understanding how different regions of the brain contribute to our emotional experiences, researchers are making progress toward a better understanding of this important emotion. Based on our understanding of the neuroscience of happiness, there are several strategies that we can use to increase our levels of happiness and improve our emotional well-being. Best strategy is to focus on activities that increase levels of dopamine and serotonin in the brain. Dopamine is associated with feelings of pleasure and reward, while serotonin is involved in regulating mood and promoting feelings of well-being. Activities that increase dopamine and serotonin levels in the brain include exercise, spending time in nature, listening to music, and engaging in hobbies or activities that bring us pleasure and fulfillment. One strategy is to strengthen the prefrontal cortex through activities like meditation, mindfulness, and cognitive behavioral therapy. These activities can help us improve our ability to regulate our emotions and make decisions, which can in turn lead to increased feelings of happiness and well-being. Another of these strategies, it's also important to prioritize social connections and cultivate positive relationships with others. Research has shown that social support and positive relationships are strongly associated with increased levels of happiness and well-being. Finally, it's important to remember that happiness is a complex emotion that is influenced by a variety of factors, including genetics, environment, and life experiences. While there are strategies that we can use to increase our levels of happiness, it's also important to practice self-compassion and accept that there will be times when we experience negative emotions or difficult life events. By practicing self-care and prioritizing our emotional well-being, we can work towards a more balanced and fulfilling life. In conclusion, the neuroscience of happiness provides us with a fascinating glimpse into the inner workings of our brains and how they contribute to our emotional experiences. By understanding the key neurotransmitters and brain regions involved in generating feelings of happiness, we can begin to develop strategies for increasing our levels of happiness and improving our overall well-being. Thank you for tuning in to this episode, and we hope to see you again next time for another exciting discussion about the science of happiness.